from PRX.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and friends beyond the binary. It's time for the podcast that's been asking for a few months. You know, I'd like to know Drake's plan. You know, what about, I don't need to know the top plan, but Drake, what's your plan? And if you got a secret one, like going to the In-N-Out Burger with Steph Curry without me, you know, maybe fill me in. But I actually was in bed asleep when you did that, whatever that was, a year or two ago. Anyway, it's time for sleep. Who ponders these kind of things? I do. It's time for Sleep With Me, the podcast that puts you to sleep. All right, everybody, it's time to talk about tonight's sponsor, Helix Sleep. And I'm excited to tell you about my Helix mattress. You know, I took the Helix quiz after I moved at helixsleep.com/sleep. And I got matched with an amazing mattress that fits my sleep needs, my feel preferences. And every winter night, I'm cuddled up in there. I am so cozy. How about you and your mattress? Do you have that kind of same relationship where every night you say, "Hey, boo, I can't wait to see you," like a mattress that fits your needs? What do you want in a mattress? What's going to make you comfortable so that you could drift off into dreamland? That's what Helix has figured out, because you go to helixsleep.com/sleep. You take that Helix quiz. Helix matches you with the perfect mattress based on your personal preferences and sleep needs. It makes buying a mattress so easy. It brings such peace of mind. Helix mattresses are award-winning beds, not just my favorites, but they've been tested and reviewed by experts like Forbes and Wired. And that Helix mattress comes straight to your door. Free shipping in the U.S., and I know I'm sleeping good in my Helix. I just don't know about you and the mattress you have right now. Maybe it is time for an upgrade. And now is the perfect time, because, of course, Helix has a deal for our listeners. Go to helixsleep.com/sleep for 27% off site-wide during their President's Day sale. Now through March 1st. This offer is exclusive for listeners of Sleep With Me. That's helixsleep.com/sleep for this exclusive offer, 27% off site-wide. Make sure you enter our show name after checkout so they know we sent you. helixsleep.com/sleep. Thanks, everybody.
If your eyes are the windows to your soul and your glasses are the windows to your eyes, then it's pretty important to find your perfect frames. That's why at Warby Parker, we've made shopping for eyewear as easy and fun as can be. Peruse endless styles in our stores, or use our app to virtually try on frames and get personalized recommendations. To find your next favorite pair of glasses, sunglasses, or contact lenses, or to locate your nearest Warby Parker store, head over to warbyparker.com. That's warbyparker.com.
All right, everybody, this is Scooch here. This is a message for all night listeners. So if you listen to more than one episode a night, pay attention. Before I get to that, if you're new, if you only listen occasionally, if you're just going through a tough time, or you're not in a place financially where you could support the show, don't worry about it. We got you. Supporters like Melissa that we're going to talk about here have you. But if you're an all-night listener, and I'm here with you 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 episodes a night, you know, I love making this podcast. We put a lot of work into each of those episodes you listen to every single night. And the only reason multiple episodes come out every week is because of the people like Melissa who support the show. And when people like Melissa sign up, I send them a video to find out why they supported the show. Because if you're an all-night listener, it's either you supporting the show or it's another all-night listener supporting the show for you. Maybe their why is stronger. Maybe they just happen to be paying attention. Or there's nights where there's no all-night listeners supporting the show, right? And that makes it really tough to keep the show going. Now, if you decide to support the show right now, you can do that at sleepwithmepodcast.com/plus, because that's what Melissa did. Melissa had been listening over 2 years, nearly nightly, And the show helps me so much. I finally subscribed when I realized that most nights I didn't have my phone with me, but I could recite the entire beginning of the podcast. At first it was a cost, but now I'm financially able to do so. But the other part was complacency. I think I was forgetting to do so, and then I'd fall asleep. I've always been one of those super listeners described on the show who kept putting it off. But I think you say it well in the podcast. The show has given me so much support and help. It's time to turn around and support you and the team. It feels nice to feel like we have a hand in keeping it afloat. So thanks, Melissa. If you're the Melissa tonight, maybe you're an all-night listener, or maybe you're some other kind of super listener, I'd love to hear your why of why you support the show. So make sure to reply to that video when I send it out. And you could sign up right now at sleepwithmepodcast.com/plus. sleepwithmepodcast.com/plus. Oh, Mystery Bard. A lot of people help out on the show. Who are they?
Chris Posty Poster Son sounds like an earful. Wrote the theme song. Edits episodes. Carl W. the Legend. Also edits episodes. Ashley, Kenny, Scotty, Jennifer. Runner. Eric and the team at Astound are on the website. I am the Mystery Bard. I do the lullabies, yeah. I do commissions at JonathanMann.net. I'll write a song for you. Any reason at all. You can tell me the story and I'll make it personal. You see the kindness shine straight on through when the listeners form their own Facebook group. Keith, Stacy, Sarah, Julie, and Jennifer. These are your moderators. Get support dear Scooter on Patreon. Buy the merch and support the sponsors. You can find anything you want at sleepwithmepodcast.com. And we're so proud that we could dance. Rusty Biscuit, Lois, Anna like banana. Leah does the transcripts.
Thanks, Mystery Bard. And hey, the thing I've been talking about lately is there's ways to support the show beyond the sponsors and supporting the show directly. If you're an occasional listener, right? If you're a new listener or you can't afford to support the show, follow the show on your podcast app of choice. Make sure to like or comment if your app allows that, and say hi. Spread the word about the show in person when it comes up, or let people know about it. Go ahead right now. Follow the show on your podcast app right now. Then you get the latest episodes and stuff like that. Great. Yeah, spread the word when you can, or sign up we're relaunching our referral program. It's going to be based with live stream get-togethers every once in a while. We're going to make it more fun. You could sign up for that. sleepwithmepodcast.com/refer, REFER. Thanks, and what do you say we get on with the show? Hey, are you up all night tossing and turning, mind racing, trouble getting to sleep, trouble staying asleep? Well, welcome. This is Sleep With Me, the podcast that puts you to sleep. We do with a bedtime story. All you need to do is get in bed, turn out the lights, and press play. I'm going to do the rest. What I'm going to attempt to do is create a safe place where you could set aside whatever's keeping you awake, whether it's thoughts, feelings, physical sensations, time, temperature, seasonal changes, seasonal stuff, travel, whatever's keeping you awake. I'd like to take your mind off that. I'd like to distract you from it in a way that's just interesting enough to get your attention, but not super engaging. And that's what I like, a safe place where you could say, I could pay a safe. Imagine a school. I guess this wouldn't be a very good school. Would it be a good school to sleep in? Well, I guess it would be more of a professorial situation, or some sort of experimental school that the funding doesn't come through for the second year or quarter, run by Scoots, where we say paying attention is optional. There was a Simpsons episode like that where Bart and Lisa got sent to the wrong schools. Yeah, really, early on. But they say, hey, go ahead and get in, bean bags and all that stuff. That's my safe place. So this is a podcast where listening is optional. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send my voice across the deep, dark night. I'm going to use the lulling, soothing, creaky, dulcet tones, pointless meanders. I've already been on a couple. Tangents, meanderwear. Not me. My meanderwear is meanderwear. I try to make you feel comfortable, and maybe not make you guffaw, But, just fall. I guess, yes, could you just fall or guff? I guess I'm more of a guffer. You'd say, Scoots doesn't make me, you'd say, in my perfect world, you'd say, Scoots doesn't make me guffaw, but I do get a little bit of a guff out. And I guess that's good because there was those Billy Guffs. Those were Billy Gruff goats or something. Let's go back to that. Let me set up new listeners. I'm glad you're here. Trying to create a safe place to help you fall asleep. Let me give you a couple structural things. Show starts with business, about 4 minutes of business. That's how we keep the show and over 650 archived episodes free as sponsors and the patrons at the top of the show and between the intro and the story. And you can find all that at sleepwithmepodcast.com/sponsors. But if you're new, that's not super important. Thanks for sitting through that. Then there's the intro. The intros are around 12 minutes or so of me welcoming the new listeners. And then, so it's a familiar part. You say, hey, welcome to the show. Let me get you set up so you know what's coming. And then I get mixed up usually or distracted by Billy Goats and what are their names? And is there a word called guff? I mean, I know there is. How about a shirt that says, are you guff enough? I think Waiting for Guffman might have they might have, they might say, well, I doth protest. So there's an intro where I ramble for about 12 minutes. Most listeners said it while they're getting ready for bed or while they're just winding down, just getting into bed. And it kind of sets the stage for the rest of the show. Tonight, we'll be talking about we'll have an episode of our ongoing episodically modular serial series about a girl who lives in a theme park, a very dense and lulling bedtime story. And a few listeners just skip ahead to that. Those are usually people, they check out the ads and then skip ahead to the story. And some people fall asleep during the intro. Some people listen to the intro over and over again. And some people let the podcast play all night. So there's no real wrong way to listen to the podcast. You don't need to listen, clearly. Oh, structure. Sorry, I was already mixed up. I already went off topic. So there's an intro, a bedtime story, and some thank yous at the end. And there's ways to support the show sandwiched in there. So that's the structure of the show. But you don't need to listen. It'd be great if you pay attention at the top of the show, but otherwise you don't need to pay attention. You don't need to pay me any mind. And you can listen at a low volume. You can adjust the volume. You could put a pillow over your phone, or you could put your phone on your nightstand and put a pillow over your head, or use a Bluetooth speaker. That's what I would recommend. Or sleep phones. So that's, so you don't need to listen to me. That's optional. But if you can't sleep, if you need some companionship in the deep, dark night, I'll be here all the way to the end. Because I know there is a percentage of listeners, ever since the start of the show, that are going to be up all night. And I'm here to keep you company, to keep you barely entertained, to give you some guffs. Because I doth declare I am guff enough. Hopefully, I guess I probably should have Googled what guff means. Because I guess usually say, hey, are you giving me some guff? And I'd say, yeah, I'm giving you guff by the dozens. Guffaws, half guffaws. Guffaws, half off. Because I don't want to give you any awes. Because that's after the guff. You know what I mean? You can have an incomplete guffaw. That's a guff. But to have an awe, I don't know if you can have an awe without having a guff. You can have a guff without an awe. Oh, wait. Oh, sorry. I got to get back to the new listeners. I was trying to explain so this is a podcast you don't really need to listen to. And you're also under no pressure to fall asleep. I'll be here for about an hour, and I'll be giving it my all. So you can fall asleep whenever you feel like it. Just like if we were holding hands, if you're comfortable with that imagery, we don't really need to. We don't need to hold hands, but I'll be here walking at your side. And ideally, you'll slowly drift through my hands or drift off into dreamland. So that's how the show works. And usually this part of the intro where I try to make a metaphor for how the podcast works. And part of it is, like maybe like something like pre-humor. They say, what's kind of like humor? It's like maybe Scoots has some of the energy of jokes, like the raw material. He just doesn't know what to do with it. He's kind of sitting in, like rare earth minerals. He's got, I wouldn't say they're rare humor minerals, but he does have some, basic humor constructs. They're just all over the place. And I'd say in the hands of someone more deft, they would be handing out guffaws, but I'm just here to hand out guffs. And I still am confused, so I do need to take a few minutes to analyze these words. So there's guffaw, then there's guff. Then I think my grandparents' would say, if you were like, if you had an attitude, they would say, save the guff for somebody else. I think I can hear that, but I hear a lot of things that aren't, necessarily exist at all. And then there was the Billy Goats, and I guess those were the Billy Goats gruff. They weren't the Billy Goats guff. They were the Billy Goats gruff, which I think and I'm not trying to do this intentionally, like scruff. I picture Billy Goats with scruff, like kind of like half beards. So what makes them gruff? Because does that mean? And I'll look it up later. But what made them gruff? Like they all went over a bridge, and that's all. I remember the other stuff that happened with the bridge tender who said, "Well, hey, how about this or how about that? Who's traipsing around? I just painted this bridge." We all know how that story went. Some of us, but one of us maybe not. So those were the Billy Goats gruff. As opposed to, and then there's the grandparents that maybe at some point in the last 300 years said guff. I think that's a thing. I will look it up when I'm done. But I'm saying, I'm trying, oh boy, I guess ideally I lost you somewhere along there as I try to follow these thoughts. But humor-like stuff, guff. And I think there was a movie that I used to watch a long time ago called Tough Enough, maybe, but I've Googled it and I said, no, that's not the same movie. But I have the guff stuff. What did I say before? I'm going to bring the guff. I don't think I said, I do. I try to bring the guff. Buckets of guff. My voice is gruff. I don't even know what gruff means, but I would say these are creaky, dulcet, gruffy tones. Yeah, they're gruffy. He's not stuffy. He's more gruffy. Also, that was my favorite Muppet that only appeared on one episode of The Muppet Show was Gruffy. Gruffy the puppy. Yeah, he worked for Rolf for a little while. Rolf was a piano player. Am I correct? Yeah, Gruffy. He was like Rolf's cousin, and his job was to shine the keys of the piano. And Gruffy the puppy. Only one episode. I think it was like the Muppets episode 47, the lost episode, only available on the Muppet tapes, which were downloaded directly into my brain. And unfortunately, they're not even available on eBay because they're kind of surrounded by guffy stuff. So anyway, if you're new here, I would posit that that was a pretty dense I don't know if that was a non sequitur, but it was a nonsensitor. So making up words now nonstop. Anyway, hopefully I took your mind off stuff. This is a podcast to help you, to keep you company, and to distract you as you drift off into sleep. It's a little bit different than most things. A little bit silly, a little bit strange, but I really want to help. I've been there, sleepless in the deep dark night. Last night, oof. Yeah, I was, I had multiple distractions going on and kept waking up, and I don't think I had any trouble initially falling asleep, but yeah, and the thing is, I know what it's like, and I feel for you, and I may not know exactly why you can't get a good night's sleep, but I really, truly wholeheartedly believe you deserve a good night's sleep. And I believe the world will be a better place if you're rested and out there flourishing in it. So I'm here to help. Now, it doesn't help everybody. Give it 2 or 3 tries, 3 or 4 tries if needed, and see if it works. It's no pressure. Test it out and see what happens. No expectations, but I hope it helps. I work very hard. I yearn and I strive because I want to help you fall asleep. Thanks for coming by. And if I could have a few minutes of your attention while we talk about how we keep the show a-going. All right, everybody, it's time to talk about tonight's sponsor, ZocDoc. And raise your hand if you're a bit of a procrastinator like me. You put off setting up that dental cleaning appointment, or honestly, any kind of appointment, or even like searching for making an appointment, figuring out even how to do that. It's not easy, right? You want to put it off because there's a lot of barriers, it seems like, to making it easy. And here's the thing. I'm so happy that we work with ZocDoc now because I have new insurance. And I know right now in my hands I have the ZocDoc app. Oh, by the way, ZocDoc is a free app and website that helps you find and book high-quality in-network doctors so you can find someone you love. And we're talking about booking in-network appointments with over 150,000 providers across all 50 states. Whether you're looking for dermatology, dentistry, primary care, eye care, or one of the other 200-plus specialties offered on ZocDoc, you can easily search by specialty or symptom to build the care team that's right for you. And it's so easy to use. I'm using it right now. I just put in my insurance information. I'm looking for a new dentist. So I can search through here. I can start reading the reviews. They're verified patient reviews, so I can get a sense, hey, am I comfortable with this person? Then I can get the appointment set up right in the app. No calling, no waiting on hold. So if ZocDoc makes my life that easy, think about what it could do for you. Stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/sleep to find and instantly book a doctor you love today. That's ZocDoc.com/sleep. ZocDoc.com/sleep. Thanks, ZocDoc, for sponsoring this message.
Museums are more than places we visit on a field trip. Across the country, museums protect our shared history, care for wildlife and collections, strengthen local economies, support job training, and spark curiosity in people of all ages. Right now, you can help make sure museums stay strong for future generations. Museum Advocacy Day is a national moment when people contact Congress to ask for continued support for museums and the federal agencies that fund them. Learn how to take action at aam-us.org and tell your representatives that museums matter to education, to communities, to the economy, and to our democracy.
All right, hey, everybody, welcome to our ongoing episodic modular, but it has a serial kind of series, extremely dreamy, and it's very dense, so that you can fall deep asleep. It's about a young girl, a young woman growing up in a theme park. And in order to transition, I want to go on Wikipedia here and read you the Wikipedia article about the film The African Queen. 1951 British-American adventure film adapted from the 1935 novel of the same name by C.S. Forester. The film was directed by John Huston and produced by Sam Spiegel and John Wolfe. It stars Humphrey Bogart, who won Academy Award for Best Actor, his only Oscar, and Katharine Hepburn. It currently holds a 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, fresh rating. It was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry in 1994. And I am going to run through the plot here as we drift away. It starts with Samuel Sayer and his sister Rose in German East Africa at the beginning of WW1 in 1914. Their mail and supplies are delivered by a small steam launch named the African Queen, helmed by rough and ready Canadian Captain Charlie Allnutt, whose coarse behavior they tolerate in a stiff manner. Charlie warns them, trouble's on the horizon, but the sailors stay on. And then, the WW type stuff gets started. And other, stuff that impacts Rose. And her and Charlie get set off in the African Queen. Charlie says, hey, there's stuff in the river, other people, other boats, including the Queen Louise, running around. And Rose comes up with a kind of a vision to deal with that. Charlie says, that's going to be really tough. There's rapids, there's forts, but Rose is insistent. And during their journey, they encounter many obstacles, just like a good movie. And, it starts off easy, then it gets tougher. They have to improvise. Then they go through a second thing. It gets a little tougher, but they make it. And eventually they embrace, but then, they say, hey, what about, life in a boat, just the two of us. And then there's more rapids, and they say, well, this time the boat might be toast. And they go to shore, they try to do some fixing, and they do. And then they improvise again. Rose improvises even a bellows. But then they lose the channel, and they're lost in a sprawling delta, and they're stuck in the muck, and no supplies, and low, they're at the edge, as they say. And then the rains come, and it rises the river up, and they float away out of the muck and into the lake, where they sneak around. And then Rose says, "Hey, let's end that, WW them back as in with these cylinders." And there's more serious adventuring. And then they think, wait a second, we kind of like each other. And they say, well, where'd Rose go? And then they say, well, you, what about you, Charlie? Whose side are you on? And then Rose is back, and then Charlie's in trouble. And she says, hey, Charlie, what's up, buddy? You remember that, embracing the boats? But he wants to keep, protect her. So he says, hardy, rough. But then Rose says, I'm going to tell you everything. And then they say, well, why don't we get married then? Because let's do that. And then they say, well, why not? We do this kind of thing all the time. But then they realize that the African Queen had tricked them. And the plan was really like a double tricky poo. And now that they're married, they head off in love. And I want you to head off drifting like a boat on a river, which is much like a bird drifting in the air, on the thermals in the sky, or floating in the water, as we drift deeper into another space. I guess my story about you is a bit different than the other attractions. For my borders grew over the years because my trees, or the trees that are part of me, it's strange to be an outdoor attraction, almost entirely outdoors. Because I guess I am different than a lot of the other attractions. Not that there's not others like me, but you see the trees that were within me, are a part of me, because I guess I'm not sure of that, but I'm deeply connected to those trees. And over the years, those trees have gone under the earth and floated on the air and connected with other trees and grew other trees. And also the vines and the mosses you see hanging from a lot of the trees here in the park. Those are part of me, and because of that, I can be in touch with them, and I can observe through them. So I had already been watching you, with amusement, I might say, and curiosity. Maybe I'm a mirror, because you seem to be full of the second one. You would, sometimes I would see amusement on you. But yes, I kind of grew across the park, though I never took on some bigwig role that I speak for other attractions, or that I speak for the park as a whole. And I'm not much of a gossip. That's what everybody thought to say. Well, tell me what's going on over at Science Central. Is it and I said, well, it's not my thing. I'm just, it is actually... When you're a vine or a tree, people don't bother you with questions. No one knew until now. So I guess it doesn't matter now anyway. But I would watch you back at the World of Toys up in that tower, the tall clock tower. And how even after you left that attraction, you would return to that tower and look out across the park, across the horizon. And how you had created a little workshop at its base with your binoculars and your tools and your marker. You were keeping track of things. And at first I was like, she's just looking on the horizon for other people like her. But I also began to notice you looking around the park with more and more detail and starting to gather things. And I said, she's on you're looking for the caretaker, I believe. And I know you had a big pile of candy wrappers. There was that one bar they had in the park and named after I think it's synonymous with the squirrel character of the park, Nutso, with a Z. And that was the Nutso bar. And you had been gathering wrappers you found around the park, which were too fresh. And I said, she's on a case. She's looking to find out who's leaving these Nutso wrappers around. And you had boot prints you had dug out of the mud and took with you. I know you had read some, you've been reading so many books, that some of those books of mysteries and investigations had inspired you. And I don't read, so I was like, does she consider herself a fancy Nancy now? But one time I opened my mouth, someone had a laugh at that. I said, well, I don't know who are the kid investigators. And they said G and DK are the most famous kid investigators. Well, you had laid out what was clearly another presence there, the boots, the candy, muddy handprints on gardening things, even a couple of shirts and things. And I said, is the caretaker had gotten sloppy or what? But you'd gathered them over time. And some were older than the others. But that's all you had. And you kept watching from your clock tower, trying to find who was leaving these candy wrappers and these blue boot prints around. And I understand that you had kind of started to grow in age and maturity and knowledge. And you were no fool. You said, someone else is here providing part of this for me. Someone else is helping take care of this park. Why haven't I seen them? Why haven't they reached out to me? Why haven't they contacted me at all? What is going on? And sometimes you could lose your frustration. Now, you'd never come to me, but that was mostly because I was very overgrown. And so you'd say, you wouldn't even know. You'd say, is that a retention basin, or was that once, your eye would skip over it. There was also the sinkhole that formed on a street in the land of adventure. So no one would go that way. It looked like that part of the park was, you'd have to go all the way around. And even coming up the other side, which had, I think something else was blocking the other side down there, but even coming up the other side, the sinkhole was still in the entire road in front of the path, the walkway, I guess they called it when the park was open, is gone. So there really was no way to go in as a guest would. And you were smart even as a young child. So as soon as you saw the sinkhole, you realized, oh, this is probably growing a little bit. No reason, plenty of other places to explore. And even getting the idea, oh, there's sinkholes in this area, but not in these other areas. Why should I be about in a sinkhole area unless I really need to? So I have to give it to you very much. It wasn't a hospitable. I'm not a hospitable place. Full of life, though. Not the life you. Well, we'll talk about that right now. But then I caught your attention, or I didn't exactly catch your attention. But you had become more and more adept at scanning the park and noticing things as you would have been on the case and been more and more frustrated with your lack of results. And you started to notice the activity of the birds above me. And when some birds lived in my trees, and the fact was, when someone would disturb them, they would all fly up. Or when someone would drop something for the birds to eat, they would all gather and circle and make a big fuss. And I think for a long time you just said, well, that's what birds do every once in a while. They fly out of their trees and they make a big to-do. Must be bird behavior. But something about it one day caught your attention, and you started to just keep track of what the weather was like, what the time of day was that the birds were making it to do. And I don't know if you noticed a pattern, but you noticed something. And then there was one time you were just sitting up there thinking and looking, not really scanning, at ease. And you have to be looking my way at the lush trees and just barely be able to see through the dense canopy. Little sparkles of water, but you weren't really studying me. It was like you were looking through me. I don't know what you were thinking about, because I was seeing you from a tree just across the way that was almost as high as the clock tower. Yeah, but I couldn't, just because I had access to the trees and the vines didn't mean I could read your mind. Yeah, but then all of these birds just shot up, and it was sudden, and they were circling, and they were squawking, saying, hey, hey, hey. And I think you even noticed some bushes or some trees moving. And so you noted it, and then you rushed down in a hurry. But it took you quite a while to climb down the clock tower, gather your things that you like to bring with you. Of course, a light jacket always, and a probing walking stick. And then you headed over and you realized, oh, yes, there's sinkholes there. That's the patch of green behind the sinkhole. But then you set to it. You set to exploring, and you probed the end of the sinkhole. But the end of the sinkhole went all the way up against the side of some of the very well-constructed small town USA, for the main strip of shops. And so then you climbed eventually over onto the roofs of those that you had been on before. And you climbed back down and headed through some of the backstage areas. And eventually you found your way through a fence, and you followed the side of the fence, very, very thick foliage, into another fence. And that was slow going at first, but you stuck by the fence, which was smart because you could barely see very far. And the tree was, and this was just a fence separating the attraction from the backstage area so that the cast couldn't go messing around in my attraction. And I think maybe the founder's grandchildren or something would sneak back there occasionally. But you followed the fence all the way up into the edge of my attraction. And actually, what you didn't know is like, of the boundaries of the park. And there was, you could see through one fence. And you could see on the other side of the fence it had been landscaped. The fence was, this was not the fence, an internal park fence. This was an internal park fence running into a fence to the outside. And you could see to your right, finally, that was cleared. And to your left on the other side of the fence you were on, that it was clear that someone was maintaining this fence. On either side, all of the brush and all of the vines were constantly being taken off. And then you could see the big canal, the big retention basin, separating the boundaries of the park, actually. The guests would never see it because it looked moat-like. And then on the other side of that, yet another fence that was not as well maintained, but was still maintained. And these were, not fences for the guests to see, so they were painted dark colors and not very inviting. And you followed the boundary fence to the right, and eventually, after not that long of walking, there was a path, a clear path along the fence where the forest, the jungle was kept at bay. And eventually you reached the two canals that led into my attraction. And your ears pricked right up and you could hear that there was pumps working. The pumps are bringing water in and pumping water back out. And then you saw how that there was a bridge bringing water in from these large hills outside of the boundary, still part of the larger property. I don't know why I'm explaining this all back to you, but those hills were actually reservoirs of rainwater, and that would bring fresh water back into my attraction when needed and pump the water out so that the water in my attraction, the river, I'm a river, by the way, is always slowly moving. And you could also see the solar panels that were running the pumps, and that those were very clean. And this got your attention because anytime something's kept up in this park here, in this way, it gets your attention, obviously. Your mind had become very, very... you were maintaining your mind like this fence and this equipment was being maintained. And you looked down at the canals and you noticed it was not just pumps, but it was a system of locks to let things in, and that there was even fencing down there. And then you noticed in the canal, and the fencing was very tight because there was fish in the canal. And that it was a very fine, almost netting to keep the fish, or even the littler fish, from swimming out. And that the nice thing was the water was so slow moving that even the smaller fish were not getting, it was no problem. And so you said, this is interesting. And then you followed the fence around the entire attraction, moving clockwise around my boundary, which was slow going, because it was just a few feet between the fence and the thick jungle. And eventually you found your way to the loading and unloading area, to the docks, in some of the cast member areas, and the building that would do the loading and the unloading which wasn't really in terrible shape. It hadn't been kept up, but it had been made from composites. And I think because of the use of, the use that the guests couldn't see, the composites were on some concrete, and there was some concrete that it wasn't a lot of dirt for growth to take hold there. And there wasn't really any wood. It was all concrete and composites and very well made. So you started going through and the interesting thing was, this was preparing for a jungle adventure, a cruise down the jungle rivers. And so you started, it was already set up like a camp, and there was still some parts that weren't in terrible shape. So you ended up bringing your bedroll in, and then you would sleep in the loading area that was designed to look like a camp anyway. And you would listen to the sounds, which were very intense by me, the bird sounds and the little cricket sounds and the sounds of bubbling and frogs, fish jumping. It was a nice place to sleep, especially with, you had those nets, so you didn't have to worry about it. And the water, we had no stagnant water here, so it was a nice place to rest. And then you just started digging more through the cast member areas. This was like a place that was very personalized. You had my attraction, you had to apply again to be there because each boat had a host on it that was there to tell their own jokes and things while they gave you this imaginary tour deep into the heart of the rivers, as Conrad would say in different terms. So you started getting into their lockers, which took some effort, and that's where you found in one locker a photo album, which you took back with you. And you also found that one of the lockers had miscellaneous things for the gift shop, and you found a book about my attraction, so you got to look at what I looked like in my heyday. And you would stay there at night, and you had your little lamp. It was like I'd become real in some sense. And you were an adventurer just on the edge of my adventure, waiting and reading. And, you didn't wait very long to do the adventuring, but at night, you'd be resting and reading and looking at the pictures of me, and then looking through this photo album of a young woman, and pictures of her with her family, visiting her. She was a boat captain, but also, doing family things and her growing up with her family. Just looking at all of her and her siblings and her happiness, and times she didn't look so happy. But during the day, you were exploring the forests and the jungles around me, within me, that were me. And you did start to find the paths of some well-worn paths, and you followed them. And some of them went to technical things, like the pumps that ran the waterfalls, all the waterfalls within my attraction that were also powered by the sun and solar panels just put out of sight, but that they were regularly maintained to aerate the water. And even from the top of the waterfalls, you could see down into the water that was a part of me as well. And that because the water was moving and aerating, it seemed somewhat clean and clear depending on the day. So you could see that it was teeming with life, with fish, some spots of floating algae or floating plants. I don't know. I know them. But only by their personality, which is, they're kind of slow moving and chill. You could see things larger than fish that were swimming occasionally and saying hello to the fish. Would you get in my belly? Modern dinos, I'd say we could call them, and agree. Yeah, and you said, okay, I've got to keep an eye out for them. They don't look too friendly. And you started to explore more, and you noticed, that some of the paths, as they headed towards the water, had wicker fences about 3 feet high on either side that you could easily step over but you had determined, that's to keep the dinos, the modern dinos, because they're very low and squat. They probably can't get over these fences. They'll just bump into them. So you thought that was interesting, and you followed those paths that went down to parts of the water. And you said, okay, this is where the fishing goes on. And you found equipment for both fishing with lines and of going in poles and things to get out baskets. You say, that's an easy way to get the fish in these baskets. And, you said, okay, you even found a bigger boom with the net. And that took you a while to figure out, but you realized that was a place where those, modern dinos gathered, a little bit deeper of a pool, where there was fish that would go down deeper, and they would go visit the fish. And you said, you could tell this boom and pole and net was used. You said, this is used for these dinos. And you started to think about how you probably they had been in your belly, possibly. And even some of the birds, you realized that you were in a lush area. He said, okay, this is, and you kind of appreciated it. He said, I felt like that you said, you are giving me life, you are providing me life, but someone is maintaining this so that it is able to do so. Someone is enabling it to be somewhat wild, but not totally gone wild. And then you would wait. You would read at night, but you would got your bed closer to the big open windows looking out at the attraction. And you would wait. Sometimes you waited at the paths, and sometimes you waited up in the second floor of the queue, looking and listening. And sometimes you would hear the birds stir and you would run down, but you never saw anyone. And eventually you started finding the occasional candy wrapper, and you started to get a bit frustrated, I think, a bit frustrated that you hadn't, that you were close, but you still hadn't seen another person, the caretaker. And this whole time, you'd also been kind of influenced by the book you were reading, looking at my attraction, and you started to find the places where the manufactured parts of my attraction, but you started to remake them with pictures from the girls' photo album, kind of like you took the giant butterfly section, and you did find some of the wires that had made up the giant butterflies, but most of the plastics and other things had fallen off or deteriorated. But you made do with some clothing, and you made the butterflies look like they had wings. But then you took a log about your size, and you designed it like a young woman, and you had found a uniform, and you put the uniform on the log, and a safari hat on the head, and you made an arm pointing at the butterflies, and you gave her some hair, like the long blonde hair of the girl in the picture. And you put a smile on her face like she was talking a joke about the butterflies. Like, what do you call it when breakfast, I don't know, when you make breakfast, the toast has wings, butterflies. I don't know. I don't remember any of the jokes they used to tell, I guess. And then you made sure the falls were clear, because you knew there was a lot of jokes about the falls. There was a welcoming party of, these jokes, I don't think, I'm surprised they still stood up. They said, well, you're not really welcome in our forest or jungle. Keep your boat moving. So you kind of designed them in a simple way, and they were blowing spitballs through spitball shooters. But again, you took another log and you designed the girl instead of being on the boats, because all my boats were gone. I don't know what had happened to them. I mean, I know there was a few sunk right at the boat repair area, but they weren't ever getting... But anyway, so you designed her and making another joke about the welcoming party and the spitballs, and you even put a spitball on her face in her frowning, one half frown, half smile. You really captured the girl from the pictures, even though you were working in logs and sticks and garbage and different things you could use, and then uniforms. It was beautiful. And then there was the camp that had been taken over by forest friends, and they'd kicked out the adventurers, and they were using all the adventurers' things. And it took you a long time to get back up. But at that one, you didn't even bother. You made it, you took a picture from her camping trip with her family, and you put them all in the tent playing a game. 4 logs, you know, a young woman, a boy, and then a mother and a father playing a board game in an open tent. And you really put a lot of work into that. And again, I was like stunned, and you were careful about all of the dinos and everything. But, you know, these were areas that weren't super accessible to them anyway. And then on the second falls, where they make a joke that I never even understood, you actually found a rock and you put a log on that pointing to the falls, saying back end, water's butt or something. This is the butt of a water joke. Don't be the butt of a joke about water. And you put her in a uniform pointing at it. And that one was almost like a hidden. I don't know if you would notice it. And you did have to climb up a waterfall and go back down, but you stayed out of the river, which I was glad about. And thus far, you had avoided the river water because of those dinos. And then there was the temple. And again, you put one from her family, and that was actually a trip of them visiting Thailand. And you did a picture of them. And you made it like they were in Thailand on a family trip there in a temple, taking time to show reverence for the statue within this temple. And all that was old, you know, that was all crafted concrete or something. So that was all, and then, you know, you put the logs in there. And instead of the end of the ride with the different things, you just did another family scene of her giving. It was just beautiful in the photo album I saw, which you were looking at, her getting a special token from the visit for each of her family members from the park. And then one last one of her waving goodbye to all the guests instead of the old... trophy things I guess we had in the attraction that maybe were past the prime. And I guess I didn't quite get it until afterwards, that you weren't just doing this for yourself, for just expression. Like when you express yourself internally, I guess you're expressing yourself externally. And so that's what you were doing. And... you were trying to get a message out there, maybe, or have someone relate to how you were feeling. But no one, I guess, I didn't realize it. I don't think there was anything I could have done other than appreciate it a little bit more. But you sat and waited, still hoping to find whoever had been coming and servicing things and getting fish, and they didn't come, and you wanted to see if they were going to come and look at your work. And then it rained, and you were even staying during the rain because you had saw that the thing to catch the dino had been set up, that they must have been out of belly dino. And so you slept in a tree overlooking that, and it rained for days, and you were miserably cold and wet and just sitting there trying to sleep in a tree or hugging it. And then eventually you woke up, and that was when the weather broke and the sun came out. And you seemed a bit perturbed. And you actually remembered, and this was, long, no details needed, but that there was a canoe that was a prop, another attraction you had been in. And you had checked it, and you said, this is a real canoe. It's not glued or anything. And so you went all the way back to that attraction and brought the canoe back, and it was heavy and unwieldy. Though you were very strong. Even with your strength, it took a full, long day, and you were exhausted. But you got that canoe in the water, and you had 2 paddles, and then I said, oh, no, this is not a good idea. And not only that, you weren't just, you grabbed a long stick and the paddles, and you started pushing over the logs that you had taken so much time to design, pushing them in the water where their hair and their smiles fell off and their uniforms sunk to the bottom. And, the ones that were on the shore, just pushing them over with a stick, and then splashing the dino friends, which they didn't take, they were confused. They said, who is it? What is going on here? But they also gave you that look. They said, what is she doing? She's just too foolish. And you were so stubborn that you decided to sleep one night in the canoe, which I said, well, it's not a terrible idea, except for the fact, with your arms crossed and a full moon lying. And he said, well, you could lie there. And the canoe just slowly moved until it was up against the fence where the water exited. So by the time you fell asleep, you were just drifted against the fence in a nice, safe, restful place. And then you awoke again, and you paddled back, and then you seemed to really, even that fire in you was just, it had been stirred up, and you saw that the thing for the dinos had still not, they hadn't, none of the dinos had swam into it. We saw there was bells on there, and you got out, and at first I thought you were going to ruin it. I said, what is she doing? And at first you were like struggling with it, and then an idea must have clicked in your head. And you undid it so that it wouldn't catch a dino. But you left it looking like it would. You got rid of whatever they'd put in there, extra dino food. And then you ran off, and you searched the park, and you searched the lockers of other attractions even, until you found a nutso bar. And then you ran back with, actually, I think you had a few stuffed in your pockets. And then I couldn't really see what you were doing, but you detached some of the what are the bells? Is that what they're called? That were on there to say, oh, we caught a dino. And you said something of your own. I said, what is she doing here? Is she trying to catch her own dino? But why would you try to, it didn't look like you were going to use a nutso bar to catch your own dino. But on land instead of water, and they're heavy. And I said, that's why the boom and the pole are there with the pulley. Because that makes it easy to lift it out of the water and swing it over and send it to the big dino park in the sky, eventually to your bellies. So then you set all that up, and you headed off actually to your bed, and then you just stubbornly stayed in your room until one night you heard the jingling of the bells, and you raced off, and as you got close and you heard the jingling, you said, okay. And before you went down that path, you paused, because you wondered, what is in, what have I got myself a dino? At first I said, is she wondering if she got herself a dino and how she's going to deal with it? But now I realize it was a combination of something that you had been waiting for. and that you were probably both incredibly excited and a little bit nervous to meet someone for the first time. And what you had anticipated, I don't really know. So you paused and you even heard some sounds that you would make, like type sounds. And you said, okay, I don't think this is a dino up there. And then you slowly moved and you saw, and this was it was only a half moon. So you could see that I didn't realize you had made your own nets. And I thought it was nice you used just tons and tons of mosquito netting so that no one would get to get. You said, oh, that's a really good way for a person. And you could hear the crinkling of the nutso bar wrapper. And you saw someone in there. And they were there. And then you were wondering what you were going to do, I guess. You said, but you untied. I said, where did she learn to do this? Books. But you settled you eventually settled, you released it and settled the net down. And the person in there would need some help, and you approached so slowly, and you made some soothing sounds, but also some quivering sounds, not believing that you were going to meet the caretaker that had been, I'm sure you had some mixed feelings before and after, but at this moment it was kind of an awe-like feeling as you slowly approached. And the net was still tied at the top, the way you had made it, so they couldn't get out without your help. And then I wondered if you wondered, what does this caretaker look like? If you had an image in your mind, and you patted the package, and it made it's okay type sound, and then they stopped struggling, and you unknotted it, and you opened it up, and looking up at you was not what you expected, not an old grizzled man. I guess that's what you expected, and that's who was on a lot of the rides. And I could tell then that you were very surprised, for this wasn't a man, but a boy younger than you, tall, and lanky, but not as tall as you, holding in his hand a nutso bar, and kind of staring at you, again, I guess because of the times and the circumstances, wasn't more so much fear as, I don't know if there's a word here, even in my jungle ride, about it, not curiosity, but he looked at you in a way, I guess maybe if there was a UFO to land, you'd say, what is, but at the same time with a knowing awareness of your presence, and that you weren't what he expected to see. And then for the first time, you spoke words to another person. First time, I guess it was monumental for me to be there, to another person. You said hello, hi, and you reached out both palms, and then you reached out one palm like a handshaker that you had seen and learned about your time in the park. And you smiled, and you pointed at the nutso bar, and you reached into your pocket and pulled out another one. Now, this boy was not his action was slow and deliberate too, not feral and grabbing, and not hostile at all. More of a comfortable interest, and he nodded and then grunted a few times, and held his up and then pointed his nutso bar at yours, and nodded again, and then instead of making a grunting sound, made a sound like, and he started to eat his nutso bar and indicated that you ate your nutso bar. And then the two of you walked back to your place, to the loading and unloading area where you made your camp. You showed him your room, and he still didn't communicate or speak back to you other than with sounds. So you made a symbol about sleeping, and you pointed to it, and he nodded. And it was a bit confusing. You said you even made him get in your bed and sleep there, and then you slept at the side of the bed with a secondary bedroll you had, and for colder nights. And you both slept so soundly in each other's presence so deeply. As the half moon set and the night grew darker and my sounds grew more comforting, and both of you breathed. I think both of you stayed awake for a little while, wondering what all this meant, this connection. Who was this other person? But you knew that this wasn't something to be overly concerned about, just to be interested in. You listened to the sounds of the night, and they carried you into a deep, deep sleep. Good night. All right, everybody, this is Scoots. This is a Tuck You In message. And as I start this message out, I want to make this very clear, especially if you're listening right now and you're new. You only listen to this show occasionally, like once in a while when you need it, or you're just having a tough time right now, getting through something, getting over something, the kind of things I talk about in the intro. Or if you're like me, a lot of times in my life where things financially felt challenging and supporting the show just isn't possible, you really don't need to do anything. You don't need to support the show directly or be concerned because we really do have you. And I'm going to read through some testimonials of people that support the show for them and for you. And those testimonials are just a few of the thousands of people that support the show so it can be here for people that can't support the show, or it really wouldn't make sense if you're only listening occasionally, if you're new, for you to support the show. So we have you covered. Like the listeners who I'm going to read through tonight, and like I'm trying to return to doing, we've done in the past, they're the reason the show can be here night after night, and that you don't have to worry about him. But before we get to those testimonials, there is a BUT, right? If you are listening right now and you normally listen all night long to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 episodes a night, or you listen most nights during the week, if you fall asleep fast and you just happen to be hearing this, or you've been listening longer than a year, if the show is a big part of your evenings, your wind down, and your sleep, you know, that's where I've been trying to be more and more clear and direct. I love making this podcast. The people that work with the show, work on the show, love making it. I love being a service, trying to bring sleepy joy and delight, help you fall asleep, bring you comfort in the deep, dark night. But the only way that happens is if you're in one of those listener categories, is if people that listen the same way as you do support the show. And we all go through seasons, right? So maybe you had your season of supporting the show, or maybe your season of supporting the show's coming up, or maybe you're like, well, I'm not sure. Let me look outside and see what I think. Or maybe you're hoping like that someone else will support the show, because it is either you or someone that listens like you supporting the show, or it's no one supporting the show tonight, right? It's either an all-night listener other than you, or you, the all-night listener, you, the multiple nights a week listener, you, the person that's been listening, or someone else that listens just like you, or it's just to be clear, like that's really what keeps the show going and impacts ups and downs of the show. So I don't know if tonight's your night. If you are in a position to support the show, you've been putting it off, maybe think about supporting it right now at sleepwithmepodcast.com/plus. And don't wait for tomorrow or set some kind of thing tomorrow. Or kind of like me, think fondly of the person that we're both hoping steps up tonight, that all-night listener, that person that falls asleep fast, somebody that's been listening 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, or someone that's here every night with us. But who has you guys? You know, who's in the community supporting the show for everyone? Well, Melissa is. Melissa's been listening for over 2 years now, nearly nightly. So a nearly nightly listener. And it helps so much and puts me in a very relaxed mood. I finally subscribed when I realized on most nights I didn't have my phone with me, but I could literally recite the beginning of the podcast in my head. And even that in my head almost worked. And the reason I didn't do it sooner was part of it was cost, but now I'm in a financial place to do so. But the other part was complacency. I think forgetting to do it when I inevitably would fall asleep. I've always been one of the super listeners described on the show, and I kept putting it off. And I think that came from a place of having all free podcasts. I think it was just truly complacency. I think you say it well in the podcast. This show has given me so much support and help. It's time to turn around and support you and the team. It feels nice to feel like we have a hand in keeping it afloat, and that is really true. And Taylor also supported the show, and Taylor said, I'm an adult, late 20s, early 30s, go through brief periods of insomnia that last around a month, and I tried Sleep With Me on a friend's recommendation and bounced off it. It wasn't until a few years later when I was really struggling that I tried it again, and it worked. And I found the ads distracting and decided to try out ad-free ones by supporting the show and found this version worked perfectly. The monthly cost is small compared to the benefit I get from the show. And even when my insomnia quiets down a bit, I still enjoy listening to the show because I like listening to Scooter. So thanks, Taylor. And then Stephanie. Stephanie has been listening for about 8 years, and I had the same experience Scooter just describes all the time. I tried the podcast and disliked it. I just didn't get it yet. And then later I was traveling. I thought I'd give her another try, and I've been listening since. And I really like the references on the show, some of the personal stories, and I can fall asleep really quickly now, and that's completely worth supporting the show. And I put on Sleep With Me also to make me feel more comfortable in other times. I just feel like I spend so much money on things that have no meaning in my life. This show means much more to me that I can't help but being a supporter. In the past, I felt like other people would take care of it for me, like there was people with limitless money who should be doing it for the rest of us. But once I really thought about how I spend my money and my deep relationship with the show, I realized I am one of the very few people who should be a supporter. It took a while, but I did so 3 years ago. I feel like I'm probably one of those super listeners. Scooter works hard for us, and hard work deserves fair compensation. And what about Debbie, who said, I listen almost every night, sometimes all night. I try to keep my queue full. I especially like the Trader Joe's episodes, and I feel comforted by a familiar voice. That's why I support Sleep With Me as a bore bestie, and it seems like a good value. The obstacle to me supporting the show was remembering to do so. Was to remember to do it once I decided to support this podcast. And if I feel responsible, free is great. But if something has worth, it's also important to support it financially. So thanks, Melissa, Taylor, Stephanie, and Debbie for supporting the show. Wouldn't exist without listeners like you. And maybe you relate to it. Maybe you're the person tonight, the Taylor, Stephanie, Debbie, Melissa tonight that'll support the show. And when you do, I believe it or not, I send out a video and I ask you why. So I'm looking forward to hearing your why of why you support the show. Thanks